Imagine being at the wrong place at the wrong time, just going about your day, when suddenly someone targets you for no reason other than the color of your skin. It's a reality that millions of people, particularly people of color, face every day. But what if this encounter didn't end the way you'd expect? What if the person who made that call, accusing you of something you didn't do, was the one who would need your help in the end? In today's story, we're about to dive into an intense moment that will leave you on the edge of your seat. This isn't just about an accusation. It's about prejudice, misunderstanding, and ultimately, the surprising twist of fate. Our main character is a highly respected doctor, a man who's worked hard to earn his position in the medical field. On one ordinary afternoon, he finds himself at a local store, trying to grab a few things for the day. But as he walks through the aisles, a woman notices him, and without a second thought, she jumps to conclusions. She stares at him, her eyes filled with suspicion, her mind immediately turning to judgment. She picks up her phone, dials the police, and starts to make a false claim. As the words spill out of her mouth, accusing him of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, she has no idea that this encounter will soon spiral out of her control. Minutes later, the situation shifts. The doctor, calm and collected despite the circumstances, suddenly finds himself being pulled into a much more complex situation. What started as a simple accusation takes a sudden, shocking turn. The very woman who had tried to ruin his day, who had tried to paint him as a criminal, is now begging him for help. Why? How did this happen? The tension builds as we follow the unfolding drama, but the real twist is just beginning. What's going through her mind now? Is it guilt, fear, or something else? And more importantly, how will the doctor respond to someone who once tried to tear down everything he worked for? This is the story of how a racist accusation turned into a life-changing moment, one that neither of them could have seen coming. Stick around as we uncover the truth behind what really happened that day and how, in a split second, things can change for both the accused and the accuser. Will the doctor show mercy, or will he turn his back on her? Stay tuned for what happens next. As the story continues, we find ourselves back in that store, where the doctor stands quietly, trying to make sense of what's unfolding around him. It's not the first time he's faced prejudice. He's used to people making assumptions based on his appearance. After all, it's something he's dealt with all his life. But today, it feels different. There's a certain weight to the woman's gaze, a certain venom in her eyes that makes him pause. He takes a deep breath, trying to push the anger that's starting to bubble up inside him aside. This isn't the time to lose his cool. He's been trained for moments like this. As a doctor, he's seen it all: stress, panic, fear, and he's learned to stay calm in the face of adversity. But this is something new. It's not about saving lives in an emergency room or giving comforting words to a patient in pain. This is about something deeper, something darker. This is about the kind of prejudice that can break a person. Meanwhile, the woman who called the police stands nearby, pacing back and forth. She seems to be filled with a kind of nervous energy, fidgeting as though the consequences of her actions haven't fully sunk in yet. It's clear she didn't expect the doctor to stand there, unmoving, not responding the way she hoped he would. She probably thought he would panic, become defensive, maybe even flee. But the doctor didn't do any of that. Instead, he stood his ground, not giving her the reaction she was seeking. It's a tense few minutes as both of them wait for the police to arrive. The doctor wonders what the woman thought would happen. Did she believe that calling the police would lead to immediate consequences for him? Did she expect him to be arrested, to be taken away in handcuffs, all because of an assumption she made based on his appearance? The doctor thinks back to his own journey. Growing up, he learned early on that the world doesn't always see you for who you are. It sees you for what it thinks you are, and that perception can be shaped by anything: your skin color, your accent, the way you dress, or where you live. For him, it was never easy. He had to fight for every opportunity, prove himself in ways that others didn't. He had to work twice as hard just to be seen as equal. And still, there were moments, like today, when people would look at him and make assumptions. But this was different. This was personal. The woman keeps her phone in her hand, her fingers trembling slightly as she glances nervously toward the entrance. She's waiting for the police, but there's a hesitation in her eyes now. It's as though she's starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, she made a mistake. But it's too late for second thoughts. The call's been made, and now the doctor is left to wait for the consequences of her actions. He can't change the past, but he can control how he handles the present. As the minutes tick by, the atmosphere in the store grows heavier. The tension is palpable. People who were once going about their business in the aisles now seem to take notice. Some glance over, curious, but quickly look away, unsure of what to do. It's as if everyone is holding their breath, waiting for something to happen, but no one is brave enough to intervene. The silence is suffocating. The sound of sirens cuts through the air, growing louder as they approach. The doctor's mind races. What if the police don't believe him? What if they take her side, despite the fact that he's done nothing wrong? What if this turns into something far worse than a simple misunderstanding? These thoughts swirl in his mind, but he forces himself to stay calm. He's been in tough situations before, and he can handle this one too. The door to the store opens, and two police officers step inside. They scan the room, their eyes landing on the doctor and the woman standing nearby. The woman quickly points toward him, her voice shaky as she explains that she feels uncomfortable, that she believes he's acting suspiciously. The officers nod, but their eyes are more focused on her now than on him. There's a sense of skepticism in the air, a sense that something doesn't quite add up. The doctor can see it in their eyes. He can sense it in the way they look at him. They approach, and the officer who steps forward asks him to step aside. It's a polite request, but there's an edge to it. The doctor complies, trying to keep his composure as the situation continues to unfold. He knows the drill. Answer their questions, stay respectful, and hope that reason prevails. But as the officers begin to ask him about his presence in the store, the woman's demeanor shifts. She starts to fidget, her eyes darting nervously from the officers to the doctor, back and forth. She seems unsure now, as though her confidence is starting to waver. The doctor watches her closely, noticing the subtle change in her body language. It's as if she's realizing that her actions might have consequences she didn't fully anticipate. The officers take note of her hesitation, and they turn their attention toward her. The woman begins to stammer, her story becoming less and less convincing with each word she speaks. The doctor listens, waiting for her to finish, wondering how much longer it will take for the truth to come to light. The officers exchange a glance, their faces unreadable. And then something unexpected happens. The woman suddenly stops speaking. She looks at the doctor, her expression shifting from one of suspicion to something else, something closer to fear. She takes a step back, her eyes wide as she stares at him. The doctor's heart skips a beat. What is she afraid of? What's happening? Before he can react, the woman takes another step back, this time almost stumbling over her own feet. She reaches out, her voice cracking as she calls out to him. Please, please, help me. The words hang in the air, and for a moment, the doctor is stunned. He's been accused of something he didn't do, humiliated in front of strangers, and yet here she is, asking for his help. It doesn't make sense. How can she go from calling the police on him to pleading with him for assistance? The officers look at each other, clearly confused by the sudden shift in the woman's behavior. The doctor stands there, still processing what's happening. The woman is trembling now, her hands shaking as she looks at him with wide, desperate eyes. The officers exchange more glances, their suspicion growing. Help me, she whispers again, her voice barely audible. The doctor takes a step forward, his mind racing. What could she possibly want from him now? After everything she's done, after everything she's tried to put him through. How can she stand there and beg him for help? Is this a trick? Is this part of some twisted plan? Or is there something deeper going on that he doesn't understand? The silence between them grows heavier as the seconds tick by. Everyone is waiting for him to make a decision. Will he help her, or will he turn his back on the woman who tried to destroy him? The tension is unbearable, and it's clear that this moment is far from over. The story is just beginning, and there are still so many questions left unanswered. What will the doctor do next? What happens when the tables are turned, and the one who accused him of wrongdoing now needs his assistance? The woman's desperate plea hangs in the air, and for a moment, everything seems to freeze. The officers look at each other, trying to figure out what just happened. The tension in the room is so thick, you could cut it with a knife. The doctor stands there, his mind racing. This was not how he thought things would play out. He expected the woman to either double down on her accusations or for the police to escalate the situation. But instead, here she is, trembling, her eyes wide with fear as she stares at him, almost pleading for something he doesn't yet understand. The silence feels deafening. The doctor can feel the weight of the moment, the way every eye in the store is on him. The officers stand still, waiting for him to say something. He's caught in the crossfire of a moment he never imagined. Should he speak? Should he help her? Should he turn his back on her after everything that happened? His instincts scream at him to keep his distance. After all, she was the one who tried to ruin his day, ruin his reputation, and possibly put his career at risk. But there's something about the fear in her eyes that stops him from walking away. Something in her desperation catches his attention, and it forces him to hesitate, to pause just for a moment. It's a feeling he can't ignore, even if he's unsure of where it will lead. "Please," she whispers again, her voice trembling. Her hand reaches out slightly, as though she's afraid to get too close, yet she wants him to see her sincerity. Or is it fear? The doctor's gaze shifts from the officers back to her, trying to make sense of the situation. What could she possibly need from him now? Is it an act, a last-ditch effort to manipulate him, to somehow cover up the mess she's created? Or is there something more at play here? He's not sure, but one thing is certain. The situation is escalating, and whatever happens next could change everything. The officers seem just as confused. One steps forward, his voice steady but firm as he addresses the woman. "Ma'am, what exactly do you need help with? You called us here under the assumption that something was wrong. What's going on now?" The woman opened her mouth to speak, but no words come out. She's shaking so badly that it's almost as if she's paralyzed with fear. The doctor watches her, his mind racing. He's no longer sure of what's going on here. The scene has shifted from one of accusation to something far more complicated. There's an urgency in her body language now, as if she's not just scared of the doctor, but of something else entirely. The officers notice it too. She takes a step toward the doctor, her eyes darting between the officers and him. I need him," she stammers. He's a doctor. Please, I need him." The words send a chill through the room. A doctor. Why would she want his help? What could she possibly need from him now, after everything she's done? The officers exchange a quick glance, their expressions unreadable. The tension in the air is thick, each moment building on the next. The doctor feels the weight of their gazes on him. They're waiting for him to make a move, to either walk away or offer help. But how can he make that decision when the stakes are so high? When his own emotions are all over the place, and everything in him wants to protect himself from being manipulated. The woman's face has turned pale, her breath coming in shallow gasps as she continues to look at him, her eyes pleading for something he doesn't yet fully understand. And just like that, a flash of realization hits him. She's not asking for help with something petty or trivial. She's not asking for sympathy. She's terrified of something much larger than this misunderstanding. The fear in her eyes isn't just about the police. It's about something much more personal, something deeper than either of them can name. He takes a step closer to her cautiously. "What's going on?" he asks, his voice low but firm. "What do you really need?" For a moment, the woman says nothing. Her chest rises and falls rapidly as she struggles to regain control of her breath. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she speaks. I'm in trouble. Real trouble. And if I don't get help, it's going to get worse." The doctor's heart skips a beat. The world around him seems to pause for just a moment. What is she saying? What kind of trouble is she in? The uncertainty of it all sends a wave of dread through him. His mind races with questions, with all the possible scenarios that could explain this sudden shift in her behavior. Is she just trying to cover her tracks, or is she genuinely afraid of something? He looks at the officers, hoping for some kind of signal, but they're just as confused as he is. The one officer steps forward again, his voice stern. "Ma'am, you need to explain what you mean. If there's a real threat to your safety, we can help, but you need to be clear with us." The woman shakes her head frantically, her eyes wild now, her face contorted in fear. "No, you don't understand. I'm not safe. He's not safe. It's all connected. Everything's connected." The doctor is trying to process her words, but they don't make sense. She's speaking in fragmented sentences, as though she's struggling to find the right words, or maybe even struggling to keep her composure. The situation is slipping out of control, and the doctor feels a strange sensation in the pit of his stomach. It's not just fear, but something else, a nagging feeling that something terrible is about to unfold, and he's somehow right in the middle of it. The officers, sensing the escalating panic, exchange worried looks. One of them reaches for his radio, seemingly intent on calling for backup, but before he can say anything, the woman collapses onto the floor in a heap. She crumples, her body shaking violently as her breath quickens. The officers rush to her side, trying to stabilize her, but she's not responding. The doctor steps forward without thinking, his instincts kicking in. He kneels beside her, checking her pulse, trying to make sense of what's happening. Her skin feels cold, her pulse faint, but it's still there. He can't tell what's wrong. Is it a panic attack? Is she having some kind of medical emergency? Or is something more sinister happening? "Get an ambulance," the doctor says urgently, his voice steady as he tries to assess the situation. "Now." But before anyone can act, the woman's eyes snap open, locking onto his with an intensity that sends chills down his spine. Her lips move, barely a whisper, but he catches her words. "He's coming for me, for both of us." The statement hangs in the air like a heavy weight, and the room goes completely still. The officers freeze, their hands hovering above their radios, unsure of how to proceed. The doctor feels a cold shiver crawl down his spine. Who is she talking about? What does she mean? And just like that, the gravity of the situation hits him. There's something much bigger at play here than he could have ever imagined. Something dangerous. And now he's entangled in it. The woman's words echo in the doctor's mind, but he can't make sense of them. "He's coming for me, for both of us." Her eyes are wide with panic, and for a moment he wonders if this is some kind of joke, some twisted manipulation to keep him off balance. But there's a strange authenticity in her voice, a fear so raw it makes his heart race. The atmosphere in the store is suffocating, thick with uncertainty and dread. The officers are frozen, unsure of what to do next. No one moves. No one breathes. The doctor's mind is spinning. He's trained to deal with medical emergencies, to think logically and act swiftly, but this situation feels different. There's an undercurrent of something far darker, something much more dangerous than anything he could have prepared for. His instincts tell him that the woman is in genuine distress, but the connection between her fear and the mysterious he she's talking about is like an unsolvable puzzle. Who is she talking about? Who is coming for them? And why? The woman's breathing is shallow, her body still trembling. The officers, realizing she's not responding to them, start calling for backup, their voices calm but urgent. But in the silence that follows, the tension only deepens. The sound of their radios crackling fills the air. And then, without warning, the store's front door bursts open. The wind gusts in, carrying with it a sense of urgency, a chill that seems to freeze time. The doctor's heart skips a beat as he turns toward the door. It's not the police coming in. It's something else entirely. The figure standing in the doorway is tall, imposing, his face obscured by the shadows of the evening light behind him. He steps forward, moving with purpose, and for a moment, the doctor feels his stomach drop. It's not just the fear in the woman's voice now. There's a new, undeniable presence in the room, one that sends a wave of unease through everyone in the store. The officers immediately tense, their hands hovering over their holsters, ready for whatever comes next. The man in the doorway doesn't seem to care. He walks with the kind of confidence that only someone truly dangerous would possess. His eyes are locked on the woman, who's still lying on the floor, barely conscious. The doctor stands, torn between keeping his distance and rushing to her side. The figure pauses, his gaze flicking toward the doctor as if noticing him for the first time, and there's a flicker of something. Recognition, maybe, in his eyes. But the woman, in a sudden burst of energy, gasps and pulls herself up, her hands reaching out toward the man. "No, please, don't hurt him," she cries out, her voice filled with desperation. The figure doesn't flinch. He steps forward with the same measured pace, as if he's heard it all before. "You've brought this on yourself," he says, his voice deep, steady, and cold. He doesn't look at the doctor, but the words are directed at him, like the calm before a storm. The air in the store seems to grow heavier, suffocating. The officers exchange looks, but neither of them makes a move. They don't know what to do. They've dealt with disturbances, arguments, even threats before, but this is something else entirely. The doctor's eyes narrow as he watches the man. There's something about him, something familiar, but not in a way that makes him feel safe. A wave of unease washes over him as the pieces of the puzzle start to fit together. This man, this figure standing before them, isn't just someone from the woman's past. He's someone from the doctor's too. The realization hits him like a punch to the gut. It's not just the woman who's afraid of him. It's the doctor too. The man steps closer, his shoes clicking against the tile floor. Each step sends a ripple of dread through the doctor's body, and every part of him screams to get out, to leave before it's too late. But he can't move. He's rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the gravity of the situation. His mind races, trying to place the man's face, trying to figure out why it seems so familiar, but it's as if something is blocking the memory. The feeling is there, lurking just beneath the surface, but it's out of reach. The woman tries to stand, her body still trembling, but the man places a firm hand on her shoulder, pushing her back down. His touch is not one of affection, but of control, dominant and unyielding. "You should have listened," he says, his voice low and unrelenting. "You could have avoided this." The woman's eyes fill with tears, her lips trembling as she stammers. I didn't mean for it to go this far." The doctor takes a step forward, his voice shaky but determined. "Who are you? What do you want with her?" The man looks at him then, his gaze dark and unreadable. "You're in this now," he says coldly, "whether you like it or not." The words send a chill through the doctor's spine, and his instincts scream that this man is no ordinary threat. There's something deeper here, something tangled in the past, something that connects them all in a way that he can't quite understand. The officers finally move, stepping toward the man, their hands raised in mourning. "Sir, step away from the woman," one of them commands. But the man doesn't even flinch. Instead, he pulls something from his jacket, a sleek black device, no bigger than a phone, and with a single press of a button, the air in the room seems to shift. The doctor feels a sharp jolt, like static electricity crackling through his body, and the temperature in the store drops a few degrees. The officers freeze, looking confused and uncertain. The device hums with power, And the doctor realizes that this isn't just a confrontation. It's something far more dangerous. The man's presence is a catalyst for something bigger than just a simple confrontation, or even an assault. It's as if he's setting the stage for something much more insidious. For a moment, everything feels like it's standing still, except for the hum of the device, vibrating through the doctor's bones. The man looks at him, his gaze piercing, and there's that recognition again. The doctor is sure now. He knows this man, though he can't remember how. The tension in the air is unbearable, and the doctor's heart pounds in his chest. He doesn't know what's coming, but he knows it's going to change everything. "You don't know what you've gotten into," the man warns, his tone chilling. "And now, neither of you do." The store feels smaller now, the walls closing in, the weight of the situation pressing down on all of them. There's no way out. No one knows what will happen next, but the doctor can feel the walls tightening, the clock ticking down toward an inevitable collision. What is this man after? Why is he here? And what role does the woman play in all of this? Before he can gather his thoughts, the man's finger hovers over the device again, and the air seems to hold its breath. The hum of the device in the man's hand grows louder, vibrating in the doctor's chest like a low, ominous growl. The temperature in the store seems to dip another few degrees, and the air feels thick, charged with an unseen force. The officers take a step back, their hands instinctively reaching for their guns, unsure of what they're up against. The doctor feels the weight of the situation settle on his shoulders, like a cold hand gripping his spine. He doesn't know how much longer they can keep standing still before the whole situation spirals out of control. The man's eyes lock with his, and for a moment, it feels as though everything else in the room fades away. The woman, still crumpled on the floor, watches them both, her face pale, her body trembling in fear. It's clear now that whatever this man is here for, it involves her. And the doctor is only an unwitting pawn in a game he doesn't yet understand. "Don't do it," the doctor warns, his voice shaky but firm. The tension in the room has reached a boiling point, and he knows that one wrong move could set everything off. The man's lips curl into a twisted smile, a look of amusement playing in his eyes. He doesn't seem threatened by the doctor's words, but there's something else in his gaze, something almost predatory. "You don't understand, do you?" the man says, his voice smooth, almost conversational. "This is bigger than you, bigger than her. You've been drawn into something you'll never escape from." He lifts the device in his hand, his fingers brushing over the buttons. The air hums again, louder this time, and the temperature drops even further. The woman gasps, her body trembling uncontrollably. The doctor's mind races, trying to piece together the fragments of information, the faces, the connections. He's seen this man before, he's sure of it. But where? Why is this all happening now, in this store, with this woman? He can feel the panic rising within him, but he forces himself to stay calm, to think clearly. If he's going to survive this, he needs to outsmart the man, figure out what he's really after. A sudden realization hits him. The woman had been talking about a threat, about someone coming for them. And now, this man is here, acting like he owns the place, like he's in control of everything. His words sound almost rehearsed, like he's delivering a speech he's given 1,000 times before. But something's off. There's a crack in his confidence, a slip-up. The doctor's heart races as he understands what it is. "You're not here just for her," the doctor says, his voice growing steadier with each word. The man pauses, his eyes narrowing, and the temperature in the room seems to shift again. The officer nearest the man twitches, as though the tension is becoming unbearable. The doctor continues, his tone rising. "You're here for something else. Something you need from me." The man's lips curl into a smile again, but it's not a friendly one. "Ah," he says, a hint of surprise in his voice. "I see. You're smarter than I gave you credit for." The woman looks up at the doctor, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and confusion. She doesn't seem to understand what the doctor just pieced together, But she watches him, her body still trembling. The man steps forward, his presence so dominating that the officers hesitate. "You're right. I'm not here just for her," he admits. "I'm here for you and everything you've built." The doctor's breath catches in his throat. The words hit him like a punch. "What are you talking about? You're a doctor, a respected one, with connections. But you're not just any doctor. You're the key to something much bigger, something you've been working on without even realizing it." The man continues, "You see, we've been watching you for a long time. You've been unknowingly part of a much larger plan. A plan that involves you, her, and a whole lot more people." The doctor's mind reels. What is he talking about? What plan? He's worked in hospitals, treating patients, saving lives. He hasn't done anything criminal. He hasn't been part of any conspiracy. But the man's words, cold and calculated, send a ripple of unease through him. Could it be true? Could he have been unknowingly involved in something dark? The man steps closer, his voice growing darker. "I've had people watching you, watching her. You've both been pawns in this game for a long time." He turns toward the woman, who flinches at his gaze. "But now it's time for you to make a choice that will affect not just your lives, but the lives of so many others." The doctor feels his throat tighten. "What do you want from us?" he demands, his voice now filled with a mix of fear and anger. He's had enough of the cryptic threats, enough of this man trying to control the situation. The man's smile fades, and he becomes serious. "I need you to help me finish what you started. You've already laid the groundwork. You've been doing it for years. But now, it's time for the final piece." The final piece. The doctor feels the blood drain from his face as a horrible realization dawns on him. He has no idea what this man is talking about, but the weight of the words settles in his gut. What is this final piece? What part of his work is this man referring to? Suddenly, the woman lets out a cry of pain, clutching her chest, as if she's being torn apart from the inside. The doctor rushes to her side, his medical training kicking in instinctively. "What's happening?" he asks, his voice frantic as he tries to stabilize her. But as he touches her, something strange happens. Her skin feels cold, unnaturally cold, and there's a sudden tremor running through her body. Her eyes snap open, and for a brief moment, they aren't her eyes at all. They're filled with a different kind of energy, something not human. "Get away from her," the man shouts, and the doctor pulls back, his heart racing in his chest. The woman's body goes limp in his arms, her head lolling to one side. And then, just as quickly, she snaps back to life, her face twisting into a horrifying grin. The doctor's breath catches in his throat as he watches her, no longer sure who or what she is. Before he can react, the man steps forward and places his hand on the woman's shoulder. "You're finally ready," he says, his voice filled with satisfaction. "You've both been part of this from the very beginning. It was always meant to be this way." The final twist hits the doctor like a ton of bricks. The woman he had been trying to save, the woman who had seemed so desperate and frightened, wasn't the victim after all. She was the key. The doctor had been unknowingly part of a scheme far beyond his comprehension, and now it's all coming to light. What he had thought was a simple confrontation had been the beginning of something much larger. And as the man's cold smile returns, the doctor realizes that his role in this game has only just begun. The doctor's mind is spinning, his thoughts racing to catch up with the surreal reality unfolding before him. The woman, no, the thing that had once seemed so fragile and vulnerable, now stands before him, her face twisted into an eerie smile. Her eyes gleam with something dark, something he can't quite place. She's not who he thought she was, and neither is the man who stands next to her, the one who had been pulling the strings from the shadows. For a moment, the doctor feels completely lost. Everything he thought he knew, about medicine, about helping people, about the world around him, feels like it's been turned upside down. This was never a random encounter, never just a police call. He had been drawn into something much bigger, something far more sinister than he could have imagined. The woman, or whatever she has become, stands tall now, no longer trembling or weak. Her transformation is almost complete, and the cold grin on her face sends a shiver down the doctor's spine. The man beside her seems pleased with the progress, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "You've been part of this from the start," the man says again, his voice calm, almost gentle, as if explaining something trivial. "You just didn't know it yet. Everything you've done, every step you've taken, it's all led to this moment." The doctor's heart races as the pieces begin to fall into place. This wasn't just about saving a life or treating a patient. He had unwittingly been involved in something much darker, something that went beyond the bounds of his medical practice. This woman, this being, had been a pawn in a larger game, a game that the doctor was only just beginning to understand. But as he looks at her, something shifts within him. The fear that had gripped him earlier begins to fade, replaced by a sense of clarity. He doesn't know everything yet, but he knows one thing for sure. He can't let this continue. He can't let this man, and whatever dark force he represents, take control. Not if there's any hope of stopping it. "What do you want from me?" the doctor asks, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts in his head. "Why me?" The man's smile falters for a brief moment, but he quickly regains his composure. "You've been the key all along," he says. "You have the knowledge, the resources, the connections. Everything that's been set into motion requires someone with your expertise. And now we're almost there. You're going to help us finish what was started." The doctor's mind races. He's been used, manipulated, a tool in someone else's game. But that doesn't mean it's over. Not yet. "No," he says firmly, his voice cutting through the tension. "I won't help you. I won't be a part of whatever this is." For a moment, there's silence. The woman, no, the creature standing before him, tilts her head slightly, as if considering his words. The man's expression hardens, and the temperature in the room drops a few degrees. But the doctor stands his ground, his resolve solidifying with each passing second. "You think you have a choice." The man sneers. "You're already in this. You can't escape." The doctor's heart pounds in his chest, but his mind is sharp. He's been trained to stay calm in the face of danger, to think on his feet. He knows he has to act fast before it's too late. He looks around the store, his eyes searching for something, anything, that can help him. And then he sees it. A fire extinguisher is mounted on the wall near the entrance. It's a long shot, but it's his only shot. Without hesitating, he moves toward it, his hand reaching out. The man and the woman both notice the movement, but by then, it's too late. The doctor grabs the extinguisher and pulls the pin, releasing a thick cloud of foam in their direction. The man stumbles back, temporarily blinded by the foam, and the woman, whatever she is, screeches, her face contorting in anger. It's enough of a distraction for the doctor to make his move. He rushes past them, heading for the back exit. The officers, still frozen in shock, begin to snap out of their stupor and follow his lead, moving to block the man's path. But the man isn't done yet. As the doctor nears the exit, he feels the familiar hum of the device again. He's not sure what it is, but he knows it's something dangerous. It's the same sensation he felt earlier, the one that froze the air and made everything feel heavy. The doctor doesn't hesitate. He slams open the door and runs into the night, not looking back. The cold night air feels like a breath of fresh air, but there's no time to relax. He can hear the man's voice behind him, yelling for him to stop. The doctor's legs burn, his heart pounding in his chest, but he doesn't slow down. He has to keep moving. He can't let this man catch him. Not now. The officers are right behind him. But as the doctor turns the corner, he realizes they're not following as quickly as they should. He looks back to see them frozen in place, staring at something in the distance. For a moment, he wonders if it's the man, but when he looks again, there's nothing there. The night is still and silent, the kind of silence that makes everything feel wrong. With the fear of being caught still driving him forward, the doctor pushes on, running faster now. But as he rounds another corner, he suddenly stops dead in his tracks. The woman, no, the creature, stands in front of him, her eyes glowing in the dark. She's not what he thought she was. She's not just some victim, not just some pawn in the man's game. She's the mastermind, the key to the whole operation. The doctor's heart drops in his chest as he realizes the truth. He was never meant to save her. The woman steps forward, her ice cold, calculating. "You're too late," she whispers, her voice low and deadly. "You never had a choice." Before the doctor can react, everything goes black. When he wakes up, he's lying in a dimly lit room, disoriented and confused. The man stands over him now, no longer an imposing figure, but almost sad, as if the game is finally over. The doctor realizes, too late, that he's been trapped all along. He had thought he was saving lives, but in reality, he had been a player in a much larger game, a game where he was never the hero. The woman had been the true mastermind, and now, as the man watches him, the doctor knows he's lost. And somewhere in the shadows, the game continues.